again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Morty and Glory video. Today we are doing another unit review. This time we're going to be taking a look at the Glory Boys, the big toy soldiers, the Militarum Tempestus Scions. For those of you who have not seen one of these unit reviews before, what I like to do is give an overview of the unit, then go through its pros and cons, and finally finish with a summary. Does it get the thumbs up, the thumbs down? Is it a unit that you should be buying or one that you should be avoiding? So without further ado, let's fast rope out of the back of a Valkyrie, smash the entire area, kill anything with more than 2 legs, and dive straight into today's video. The Militarum Tempestus Scions, or just Scions for short, also known as the Stormtroopers, are the elite of the Imperial Guard. They are often described as the peak human soldiers, the best that the Imperium can field outside of the superior genetic creations of the Custodes or the biochemically enhanced Space Marines. They achieve this by undergoing some of the harshest and best training that the Imperium can provide. Many of the Tempestus Scions actually go through military training from a very, very young age, as their ranks tend to be made up of the orphaned children from Imperial Guard officers. Others are hardened, grizzled veterans of many campaigns which have been singled out for extra training, or recruits that have displayed a high level of aggression and martial prowess in the early stages of their basic training. On top of this, they are often issued the best war gear and weapons, all of them going into battle in carapace armor and wielding hotshot lasguns, also known as Helens, over the standard las rifles that most Imperial Guardsmen find themselves equipped with. If you imagine these guys as your Delta Force, your Royal Marine Commandos in space, then you will not be far off. But that's the fluff. What about the crunch? How do these guys actually look on the tabletop, and what are their rules like? Well, naturally, these guys are an elite choice. You'll find them in the same area as your Kazakin and your Commissars. Unlike many units in the Imperial Guard, which have a set number of models in a unit, for example, 10 men in a Kazakin, 10 men in an infantry squad, Scions have got a little bit more flexibility. They can be brought in units of between 5 and 10. In the new 9th edition codex, I would describe Scions as shock infantry. They are an aggressive force that you're going to want to take part in your offensive actions to capture ground and objectives off your opponent. Their firepower is truly impressive, and they will often leave your opponent reeling in surprise when these little regular-sized humans start tearing apart his army. So that's a general overview of the Scions. Now let's dive into some specifics about the unit and their pros and cons. Let's take a look at their stat line first. Now, unsurprisingly, being the best of the best of the best, these guys have improved stats over regular troops. They come with a movement of 6 and a weapon skill of 4+, fairly standard for human troops, but they do have an all-important ballistic skill of 3+. Their strength 3 and their toughness 3 with 1 wound, but they also have an extra attack over regular guardsmen with 2 attacks base. Their leadership is also high, a standard leadership of 7, unlike in regular guard squads where only the sergeant has leadership of 7, and they come with a 4+ save. The sergeant, of course, gets the standard extra attack and extra leadership, which means a Tempestus Scion sergeant with a chainsword actually has 4 attacks and has a leadership of 8, which is very nice. As a baseline, each Scion comes with a hotshot lasgun, frag and crack grenades, and each sergeant, also known as a Tempester, comes with a hotshot las pistol, chainsword and frag and crack grenades. They gain access to a variety of special weapons, including flamers, grenade launchers, melter guns and plasma guns. They also have a unique special weapon that only Scions and Kazakin can take, which is the hotshot volley gun. The hotshot volley gun is the light support weapon of the Scions. It's rapid fire 2 with a 30-inch range, strength 4, AP-2 and 1 damage. One Scion from each squad can replace his hotshot lasgun with a hotshot las pistol and a voxcaster. Important note here, in the old codex, you could have a hotshot rifle and a voxcaster. Now apparently you have to take the pistol version, which is a bit of a shame. The Tempester also comes with some pretty good war gear options. He can replace his chainsword with a power sword or a power fist. Normally, power fists are reserved for officers in the guard, but a Tempestus Scion sergeant can take one. He can also replace his hotshot las pistol with a bolt pistol or a plasma pistol. Scions also come with a couple of important data sheet abilities. The The first one is aerial drop, also known as deep strike if you're a longbeard like me. Essentially, during deployment, you can, instead of deploying this unit on the table, you can put them into reserve for free. It doesn't cost you any command points. And in turn 2 or turn 3, you can deploy them from reserve anywhere on the battlefield as long as it is over 9 inches away from your opponent's units. You've got to imagine that they're essentially teleporting in, or a Valkyrie's coming along, they're fast roping out and the Valkyrie's flying off. However you want to imagine it, these guys can essentially appear on the battlefield in later turns. Their second data sheet ability is Stormtroopers, and honestly guys, this is really, really powerful. Each town model in this unit makes an unmodified hit roll of a 6. It scores 1 additional hit. Now, Cadian shock troops have something similar to this, but it only affects their lasguns. With Scions, it affects every single attack they make. Plasma gun, melter gun, hotshot volley gun, all of those weapons. If you roll a 6 to hit, you get an extra hit. If you're rocking around with double plasma in a big 10-man squad of Scions and you roll 4 shots, you've got a half-decent chance of actually getting an extra hit for free. Likewise with volley guns, if you're firing 2 of those off, you're going to get 8 shots. You're almost guaranteed to roll at least 1 6 and get some more free hits. It really is a very good ability, and it massively improves their damage output over regular guardsmen. It's important to note that it doesn't say with ranged weapons, so that also affects your Scions in combat. And because they've got 2 attacks each base, this makes them actually surprisingly good in melee when facing off against other light infantry, such as Tau Fire Warriors, Eldar, or other guardsmen. Once you start putting all of this together, it's not hard to see why the Scions have such fantastic firepower. With the fact that they hit on 3s, and if you then give them the order take aim, which gives them +1 to hit, +1 AP, you've got a standard trooper who's hitting on 2s with an AP -3 rifle. That's the same AP as a las cannon. They also benefit from the Cadian Castellan's Senior Officer Aura, which means that they're hitting on 2s with reroll 1s. It's not uncommon to fire a unit of Scions and end up with more shots than dice you actually roll to hit with thanks to Stormtroopers. You end up firing like 4 plasma gun shots and getting 5 hits. 8 hotshot volley gun shots and ending up with 10 hits. It's pretty wild. Things really start getting absolutely bonkers when you add in warlord traits and relics to the mix. Because these guys have got the core and the platoon keyword, not only do they benefit from orders, but they also benefit from things like the Banner of the Nemradesh First, also known as the Big Bullshit Banner. This is a relic that allows them to ignore all to hit modifiers, and your opponent can't take feel no pains or have wound caps against their shots. That means if you're facing down something like a Catan or a Baden that can normally only take 3 or 4 wounds a phase, as long as these guys are near the relic banner, they don't care. They'll pick a Catan up in a turn without even breaking a sweat. I mentioned warlord traits a moment ago. Now, I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail on the warlord traits in today's video. I'm going to save that for the Scion Command Squad unit review. But suffice to say, if you like the idea of Scions being able to get up to AP -4 on their standard rifles, an AP -5 plasma, an AP -6 melter, then you're going to like the Scion Warlord traits. Now, up until this point in the video, we have been focusing on the damage output of the Scions. And naturally, you're probably listening to this and thinking, I want to get 30 of these guys. They're great. But don't overlook the fact that they can be taken in smaller squads. It really does give them a very large amount of flexibility and opens up a whole bunch of extra battlefield roles for them. A little 5-man squad is perfect for achieving those secondaries that guard can struggle with, such as line breaker and retrieve Nachman data. Having a little 5-man squad drop in, retrieve some Nachman data, and then in the following turn die is a totally accepted use of these little Scion squads. Another great role of the 5-man squads is doing little sneaky assassination missions. For example, your opponent might have a little squad of 10 grots just holding its backfield objective. Now, they've successfully screened out big 10-man squads, but a little 5-man squad Scions dropping down with a volley gun and a flamer, that'll clear out those grots fairly easily, and it's not going to cost you very many points to do it at all. Now, up until this point, I've been painting a very rosy picture of these guys, and that's because they are very good. But it is important to note they do have a few little disadvantages. The first one being that they can take no heavy weapons in their squads. That means no las cannons or heavy bolters or autocannons, anything like that. It's all right out. They just can't take it. This does mean that they tend to be more mobile, but at the same time, it means if they drop in and they smash an area, you might find their long-range firepower to be a little bit lacking and disappointing. There are ways to get around this by taking certain warlord traits, but if you're not taking those warlord traits, you will find that after the initial push, your Scions might lack a little bit of punch. You're also paying a premium for these guys. A standard Kading Shock Trooper comes in at about 6.5 points. Scion comes in at 11. And for all of these great firepower perks you're getting, you'll find that Scions tend to be no more durable than that standard guardsman. You might think that a 4+ save is a pretty big deal, but in 40k, it's not a big deal, okay? For many factions, a 4+ save is their worst armor save. The fact that it's the best in the guard doesn't mean that it's good in comparison to what everyone else is out there rocking. So you're paying 11 points per guy, but they're going to die just as easily as one of those 6-point models. Another small problem that I have with Scions is their weapon loadouts in the new codex are very frustrating. Previously, Scions could take 2 special weapons in a 5-man squad, and they could take whatever they wanted. Double plasma, double melter, double volley. It didn't matter. You could take 2 special weapons, mix and match how you want. Now, in a 5-man squad, you can still take 2 special weapons, but you can't double up, which means you can take a plasma and a volley gun, or a melter gun and a flamer, or a melter and a plasma, but you can't get double melter. This has meant that a preferred tactic from 8th edition into 9th edition is significantly weaker. A lot of people used to like taking double melter guns in a little 5-man Scion squad and dropping them in and trying to blow up an enemy tank with them. It was known as a suicide melter drop. In the new book, that tactic really isn't as viable because trying to do that with a plasma gun and a melter gun isn't going to have that same threat to a big multi-wound vehicle. And that problem scales up to a 10-man squad as well. In a 10-man squad of Scions, you can take 4 special weapons, but you can only take 2 of each. You can take 2 plasma and 2 melter, but you can't take 3 plasma and a melter, or just 4 plasma. It is a bit frustrating because it does take a bit of efficiency off a unit, and it does mean that they're a little bit less specialized. In the last codex, I would describe Scions as a scalpel, as an elite choice that you want to have a very specific job in mind. In the new book, I wouldn't describe them that way. In the new book, I would describe them as shock infantry, not special forces. But the main issue that Scions face is not anything to do with their datasheet or their abilities. It's to do with Kazakin. You see, the Kazakin are another elite choice available to the guard. They've got exactly the same stat line as a Scion, and they get pretty much access to the same war gear. In fact, they get access to more war gear than the Scions, but they're 10 points cheaper per 10-man squad. Now, whilst Kazakin do not gain access to that Stormtrooper ability, no delicious exploding 6s for them, they do get access to regimental doctrines, which is something Scions do not get access to. They have Stormtroopers instead of regimental doctrines. And that means that Kazakin can get not only things like Born Soldiers, but thanks to their Warrior Elite ability, get additional regimental doctrines on top of that. This means they have access to all of the war gear, if not more war gear than the Scions, for cheaper, and they've got more combinations rather than just Stormtroopers. They've got loads and loads of combinations and stratagems and relics they can use thanks to regimental doctrines. And because of this, many of the traditional roles that Scions have taken on can now be done by Kazakin, and in some case, they can be done by Kazakin better for less points. However, I want to be clear here. I actually don't think that Scions and Kazakin are mutually exclusive. I think that both of those units can perform different roles in the guard. Like I said, I now see Scions as kind of shock troops rather than specialists. But Kazakin, I actually see as being more specialist. Thanks to that Warrior Elite ability, they can really tailor themselves to being good at one specific job. Whereas the Scions are just all about smashing the entire area and doing as much damage to the enemy as possible. If you do have to pick between these two units, let's say you've only got so many points in your list that you're willing to allocate towards the infantry, it's going to come down to what do you want each unit to do. Scions are very good at just getting straight up into a fight. Kazakin can be tailored to do a specific mission, especially when you start taking into account some of the relics that you can give them. I would say that Kazakin are a bit more plug and play, a bit more self-contained. You can take one unit of Kazakin in your list and it only has to do one job. I would say that in some circumstances, Scions are actually better than Kazakin, especially as that sort of elite line infantry, shock infantry role. But you do need to build around them a little bit more with things like the warlord traits and the big bullshit banner. But speaking of elite line infantry, there is one thing that Scions can do, which Kazakin just cannot emulate in any way, shape, or form. There is a way to take Scions as a troop choice rather than an elite choice. The way you do this is you take a detachment that only has Scions or Navy or Commissar units, basically Valkyries, Commissars, Scions, Torx Primes, or Scion Command Squads. If you do that, then in that detachment, Scions become a troop choice. This means that you can take whole armies just of Militarum Tempestus Scions, and they're actually pretty good as well. I'm not going to go into excruciating detail on that now, because I'm going to do a separate video which covers in detail how best to run your Scion army. To be honest, I'm probably going to do a series of videos on it, because a pure Scion army plays very differently to a pure Guard army. This unit review is more in the context of taking your Scions as an elite choice in your regular Guard forces. But however you slice it, Scions are a very strong elite infantry choice. I have given them an 8 out of 10. Now, the reason I've not given them a 9 out of 10 or even a 10 out of 10 is very simple. The first one is the annoying weapon restrictions. That really just takes a whole point off them. And the other thing is the fact that Kazakin are just more plug and play. They are much easier to just slot into a list. If Kazakin didn't exist, I would probably end up giving Scions a 9 out of 10. But whilst the Scions are a little bit less specialist than the Kazakin, they do bring an absolutely blistering amount of firepower. If you take 30 Scions, combine it with a Scion Command Squad and a Caden Castellan, you have a platoon of soldiers that can just walk across the battlefield, just deleting whole enemy units at will. But those are my thoughts on the Scions. What do you guys think? Let me know down in that comment section below. Are you Team Scion or are you Team Kazakin? Let me know your thoughts on each unit down in that comment section. If you enjoyed today's video, then make sure you smash that like button like you're going to smash the entire area and kill anything with more than 2 legs, and subscribe to make sure that you never miss an episode. If you've really enjoyed today's video or you have found it particularly helpful, then please consider becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter. It is thanks to the generous support of my channel members and my patrons that I'm able to do this full time. One of the biggest benefits you get from being a channel member, and there are many others, but one of the biggest ones is access to the Mordian Glory Discord. This is an online community with over 700 active members. It is always popping off inside the MG Discord. If you want a place where you can discuss Imperial Guard, but Warhammer 40k in general as well, memes, tactics, hobbying, lists, painting, all this kind of good stuff, then make sure you get yourself into that Discord. It is a just really fun community to be a part of. And I just want to take a moment and say a big thank you to all of the latest channel members and Patreons. Now, we have recently had a big explosion of channel membership and Patrons, so this might take a little moment, but I just want to make the effort and say thank you to all of the new members. So big thank you to PJ Horton, Alec Stratton Lake, The Lonely Shepherd, Matthew, Delaccio Cappuccino, IB, Hidalago 334, Justin, Cliff, Robert M, Alex Moran, Jack, Son of Boulder, Oliver McDonald, Adrian, Crocodilian A, Feels Badman 69, Jay Hickman, Kian, Zoopskim, CT7479, John Thacker, Return of the Mac, Guard Brandon, Axel, The Anglo-Germanic Wanderer, Holden, Dimitri, Rattle, Omega, Zach, Ads, Heretic Dave 40k, Dylan, Ben, Ryan, Jack, FRVN_6, Murray Court, Dennis, Shake My Head, Mark Andre, Trubael, Nolan, Keith, Adeptus Ridiculous, Total Fan, RC Gunner, Duke of Petchington, Mike, Iger, Richard 6298.1, John, David Jensen, Tank Sniper, Asrigar, Wolfenbach, Alan, Sabian, Nick, Dylan, Fisher Fury, Kobold, Ymir, Marshall, Glomoff, Robert Lowe, Machello, David, Lord Biscuit, James Harrison, and Son Gohan. Thank you guys for becoming channel members. Thank you for doing your part. Shout out to the latest Patreon support as well. So a big thank you to Echo Marker, Potato Wrangler, Dan Dodge, Ragnarocus, Zar Phoenix, Soviet Commubot, Vincent, Ads, Jared, Brian, Rawl, Dark One Mushroom, Nick, Nancy, Victor, Tack, Blazing Baron, Jesse Kidd, Michael, David, Colin, Stulty, Mr. Joel, Eventure, Adrian, Nathan, Hatman, and Old Bean UK. Thank you guys for your ongoing support on Patreon. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal, heartfelt thank you to all of my top tier Patreon supporters. These are the War Masters, the people that have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a massive thank you to Bonbon Vert, Phil French, Ross Miller, Tequal, Alex Dengal, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Swordfish Trombone, Diesel Fox, Tom Sutton, and Sly Varney, the one-man super chatting army. Massive thank you to all of you guys. Your ongoing and very generous support is a big part of how I'm able to do this full time. I hope you've all enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching. And of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.